Today's lesson is lesson 75, factoring trinomials in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. Trinomial means we have three terms. This is our first term, this is our second term, and this is our third term. Remember, terms are subtracted by addition and subtraction symbols. This A stands for a numerical coefficient that is in front of that x squared term. In previous lessons, we have factored trinomials without that leading coefficient. Today's lesson might be a little bit challenging for you, so hang on tight, pay attention, and here we go. First problem looks like this. 3x squared plus 13x plus 12. Now, like I said, in previous lessons, we have factored without that number 3 there. Without that number 3, we have set up the x, and we've solved it by using the x. When you have a leading coefficient, you can no longer use that x as a shortcut in factoring. You've got to actually think about the things that factor to get this expression. Now you have to pay attention to that leading term. Now it matters. Not only do you have to think of the factors of 12, but you also have to think of the factors of 3. You have to kind of remember what it was that we did when we multiplied binomials. Let me refresh your memory. When we multiplied binomials, we would have something that looks like, 4x plus 2 and x plus 5. Binomial. 2 terms. This is 2 terms, this is 2 terms. Since those things are multiplying, I'm multiplying binomials. When I multiply binomials, I distribute 2 times. You may have heard it called foiling. We take the first term, we multiply it times the first term in the second binomial. 4x times x is 4x to the second power. 4x times 5 is 20x. 2 times x is 2x. And then 2 times 5 is 10. Combining the middle terms, I get 4x squared plus 22x plus 10. If you take a look at what it is that I got as my answer after I multiplied my binomial, this is what we're starting with in this lesson. We're starting with this, and we have to go back to the binomial. We have to figure out which 2 binomials multiply to get the trinomial. That process is called factoring the trinomial. Let's learn how it's done. Like I said, we're trying to figure out which 2 binomials multiply to get the trinomial. So the very first thing we're going to do is set up our binomials. What I have to do is look at the factors of 3. That's easy because 3 is a prime number. The only thing that multiplies to get 3 is 3 times 1. So my first term in my first binomial is 3x. The first term in the second binomial is x. 3x times x is how I get 3x to the second power. The second part is not so easy. I have to take a look at this 12 back here. And I have to think of its factors. The factors of 12 are 2 times 6 and 3 times 4 as well as 1 times 12. All three of those need to be considered in the thought process of factoring. What I have to do is think about the numbers that are going to occupy the back space of the binomial. It's going to be one of these numbers. This 3x is going to multiply by whatever term or whatever factor I put here. This last term of the first binomial is going to multiply by the first term of the second binomial. And together, these two things are going to combine to get 13x. Hang on now. I know it's kind of difficult. Just let me do a few problems and follow along. So I got to play around with these numbers and somehow figure out how I'm going to get 13 to come out of there. So let's start with our first number, which is 2 times 6. I put a 2 here and a 6 here. And I multiply and see what happens. I multiply 3x times 6. This here is positive. This here is positive. So for the first example, both of those things are positive. 3x times 6 is 18x. And 2 times x is 2x. When I combine those two, do I get 13x? The answer is no, I don't. So that's not the right combination. So now let's try flipping around the 6 and the 2. This is called trial and error for a reason. You try it, and if it doesn't work, you try something else. So now I'm going to put the 6 in the front and the 2 in the back and see what I get now. Multiplying the 3x times the 2, I get 6x. Multiplying the 6 times the x, I get 6x. And when I combine those two, I still don't get 13x. That tells me that this is not the answer. We then move to the next set of factors of 12 and play around with those. Remembering we're trying to get 13. So let's put the 3 here and the 4 here and see what happens. I multiply 3x times 4 to get 12x, and I multiply 3 times x to get 3x. When I combine those two, again, I do not get 13x. That's 15x. So let's try flipping those around. This time, let's put the 4 here and the 3 here. Multiplying 3x times 3, we multiply the outer terms to get 9x, and we multiply the inner terms to get 4x. Bingo! 4 plus 9 gets 13. So that's my answer. 3x plus 4 times x plus 3. And that's how I factor that trinomial. Let's take a look at another example. Our second example looks like this. 4x squared minus 23x plus 15. Now this one is a little bit more complicated. First of all, our leading coefficient is not a prime number anymore. It's a composite number, which means I now have two different choices how to get my 4x squared. It can either be 2 times 2 or it can be 4 times 1. Looking at my 15, I also have two choices. That's also a composite number, 3 times 5 or 1 times 15. So again, the very first thing I do is set up my binomials. Looking at this negative, this is a positive and this is a negative. My positive